This Week in 40K.
Good morning. Welcome to This Week in 40K, your weekly update on what the heck is going on in 40K. That's a show about the Grimdark that's not the Grimdark. That's what I was going to say. That's what was going to happen. I had it all in my head, and then I got halfway through it, and my brain went, meh, no. Billy, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I don't know if you can see behind me, but it's a different background, and it's not a green screen. I am sort of in my new apartment, I don't live in an apartment anymore. I live in a house. I live in a house for the first time in 20 years. That's basically true. It's very exciting. It's a whole hell of a lot of work, and that's impacted my ability to partake in this fine hobby that we talk so much about, although there was a lot going on this weekend, and I was bird dogging about as aggressively as one can while moving with a 3-month-old.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. By the way, good morning, Bob. Good morning, Jason. We appreciate when people join us live.
Yes.
It's more fun. It's like our morning party crew here on this lovely Tuesday morning. This morning, I made an interesting mistake. I went to make tea. I don't like coffee, but caffeine really helps me, so I drink chai tea.
Okay.
And I went to the refrigerator in my groggy tiredness at 5:45 this morning. And I grabbed the chai tea and I grabbed the milk and I combined them together and I put them in the microwave. And it came out and I thought, this does not smell right. And it turns out that the chicken broth container and the chai tea container are the same color and the same shape.
Ooh.
So basically I put chicken broth and milk into a cup and then microwaved it. The end result was not delicious.
No. I hope you like the smell of chicken noodle soup in your kitchen for half a day.
No, it's not that bad. It'll be all right.
Okay.
I have cables are stopping me from functioning here. Okay. Great. So yeah, we had a heck of a weekend for 40K. I went to a tournament, a big one. I didn't get to stay the whole time, which is great irony with how hard it is for me to go to a tournament. But I did go to a tournament. I did have a good time. I did get to see the people. I got stopped by so many people who appreciate what we do. Right here in the fields. People kept stopping me and shaking my hand and telling me how much they appreciated it. One guy who I think was Enrique, sorry if I'm remembering your name wrong, who was just so nice about it, just so deeply authentic and open about how much he appreciates what we do. Big shout out to him. Just a lot of really great people. It was about 370 people, which is the biggest tournament I think ever in the Pacific Northwest for 40K. If it's not, then something crazy happened in 7th I'm not aware of. So yeah, really, really neat. I'm going to be talking about that when we get a little bit later in the program for sure. But yeah, other than that, I'm just chilling. I'm just got a new job, doing the new job. My big kids are away for the summer with BioDad, and so I've got a quiet house. It's just, life is just continuing on, as they say.
Fair enough.
Yeah, right? Okay, let's go into our top story because that's what we do here.
Indeed.
Our top story.
What's our top story?
Well, you know how you said we were going to talk about Tacoma in a little bit? We're going to talk about it because it was this weekend. It's the first really big event of 10th. As we predicted on this show, it was dominated by Custodes.
Is that what we predicted, or is that what we're saying, telling people?
No. That's me using rhetorical irony for effect.
Ooh, rhetorical irony.
Yes.
Okay, so yes, we said that Gene Stealer Colt would win.
Yes.
That said, there is no surprises in the top 10.
In terms of players, or in terms of army factions? Okay. Yeah.
There's nothing in there that's surprising to me. I think all the haves are in that top 10 and the have-nots are not. So let's talk a little bit about Tacoma. It was a 3-day event, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, including a ghost round, which I'm really glad I didn't have to play in. And it's the ghost round is hilarious to me because the idea of playing 4 games of 40K on a Saturday when you're playing on 40K on Friday and Sunday as well sounds like punishment to me, as much as I like 40K. And so I like the idea that if I do too well, I get punished by being forced to play another game of 40K and not sleep before the finals. As expected, I was blitzed tired in my round 6 and played badly. Exactly what I predicted on the show, that my energy and endurance would not last through the tournament. It did not. Also, I got a message about a really sick doggo at the beginning of round 6, and my wife had to go to work on Sunday, and we were really worried about what to do with sick doggo. So at the end of Saturday night, I did go home, but I got to play 6 games. And by the way the bracket system works is I went home, didn't play my last 2 games, and still got 20th place. Oh yeah, go Colin. 20th place out of 370 people, and I didn't play for one of the days of the tournament. Rocking on.
Yeah. Top 6% of the event.
Yeah, quite proud of that. Quite pleased that that's what happened. Wish that I could have stayed. When I got home, I felt crappy about having left. I really wanted to be there and finish the tournament, but real life is real life. So I have prepared for us my 5 least favorite things and my 5 favorite things.
Okay.
From the tournament. And because this is the show that is neither grim nor dark, we will do the bad list first and then move into the positive list. That's what we'll do. But first, I'm going to blow my nose while Billy riffs, which he's great at.
Okay. So one of the things that, as just preview for later on as we get into this, the haves and the have-nots, there does seem to be a very clear distinction of armies that can hang and armies that can't. And it's my take on it, and Colin can come over the top because he has way more experience in 10th than I do, is it's the super durable armies and the armies that have a chance at killing those armies. And you can either try to be super durable or be able to kill the super durable. And if you're not one of those 2 things, you're going to struggle.
What a great riff. Yeah, I would dare say you're getting better at riffing on the heat of the moment.
Well, I actually should have looked, but this might be our 1-year anniversary of doing this show.
No, really?
It was sometime in July. Hold on.
Well, we have the note document, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. No, it was last week. Last week was 1 year of doing the show, but I missed 2 weeks. So next week will be my 1 year of having done this show in terms of 52 episodes. So I better be getting better at it.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Neither did
I think we skipped 1 week, so maybe we have only done 51 episodes so far. That could be.
I'll actually go and count before next week.
That sounds like you. Okay, so the Tacoma Open. So 370 people. They had said it was going to be 460. I'm unclear whether that was optimism or whether that was, whether we had like almost 100 drops. I'm really just not sure. Hey, Violence is here. Hi, Violence. I just don't know. I don't know what happened there. Nearly 100 drops seems like a lot, but I know that a lot of people aren't very happy with 10th edition, so it's a little bit hard to know. Violence says there were loads of drops, and that's what I thought was the case. I know that Bortel said that from his Portland gang that they had like 10 people drop that had tickets that were supposed to go. So that's crazy, but at the same time, there were still 370 people there, and I got to be honest, I don't think I would have been able to tell the difference between 370 and 450.
Yeah,
with how busy that room was. I do want to give a special shout out to GW, who really does a good job. The big Terminator statue they brought into the room is neat. The tables were all relatively uniform. There was a mistake with my pairing, and they were not only kind about that, but offered to buy me dinner.
Oh.
So, it was very, there were lots of judges. I got to meet Curie. I had not met him before from Stat Check. I actually called him over for a few judge calls, and the first one I called, he shrugged at me and said, "What?" I think expecting that I would know the answer, but it turns out, no, I don't know all the answers. Yeah, I agree with Violence. The GW events are insanely well run. And yeah, I agree, Anthony. Over 150 people is hard to tell. So really, really fun weekend. Chuck took Orcs. He had a good time. Hank took Custodes, which we'll talk about. Lots of friends there. All of the TNG gang were there. Basically, 3/4 of the people that are on Best in Tabletop were there. So it was really quite fun. I'm now going to share my 5 least favorite things about the tournament, even though I try to be very optimistic.
Okay.
My 5th favorite thing, my 5th
Least
least favorite thing,
Yep.
is the cards. I really liked the cards, the secondary mission cards. I really liked them before. And now that I've played them at 6 tournament games, I don't like them.
Okay.
I think that they are bland. I wish there were 40 of them. Like the fact that if we're going to be like this, if we're going to play cards, then let's play cards. I found that there's 16 of them, and some of them are almost never scored, like the hold your opponent's deployment zone for 8.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that with Eldar, but I've never done that in a game that is at all close.
Yeah.
I think that's really a win harder card. So there's a number of cards that I think are wildly difficult, and there's a bunch of cards that are wildly easy, like Cleanse. And so Violence is saying the same thing in chat that I'm saying. They're either too easy or too hard. And because of that, it does feel a little bit too random. I played in a 8th edition team tournament that we used to WTC Maelstrom cards, where you got to build your own deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really great because you could kind of put some strategy into it. If they gave me like 20 more cards and I got to pick 12 or 15 or 16, I think that would be what I would appreciate. My opponents didn't like the card system, and that made, me, I want my opponent to have a lot of fun. So when my opponent rolls their eyes and groans when they draw a card, that's not really a good experience. Some of the cards that come up there's some cards that come up on turn 1 that say that you cycle them into another card. I think there's a couple more that need to do that. Like the take your opponent's deployment zone for 8, I think is one that doesn't recycle when you get it on the first turn. So I found the cards to be pretty annoying and boring even, because it was like, okay, I got Cleanse, and okay, I got Area Denial. Great, I'll get 10 points this turn. Oh, I got 2 other ones. And the other thing I didn't like about the cards is that no one even considered taking Fixed against me. In fact, I've played about 15 or 20 games of 10th edition, and no one has taken Fixed in even one game. So I know that some people are taking Fixed, but I haven't seen it and don't know what it looks like. And that to me is bad. The idea of Fixed versus Tactical should mix with fast or tricky armies that can do the thing versus endurant armies that are slow and maybe more rigid and less flexible. Anthony, maybe he says that Fixed against Eldar is great. Maybe it is, but my opponents didn't know to do it. I don't love the cards. I certainly don't love that people aren't taking Fixed. Maybe it's only the really good players that are taking Fixed, like Anthony. Don't know.
One thing I've heard about Fixed, just really quick, is that it's as much about your opponent's army as yours. That there are some armies that it punishes skew, and that if you then go up against a more balanced all-comers kind of an army, it's a little bit less obvious how to do Fixed, is something I have heard. Not nearly enough reps to know the validity of that. Yeah,
I think that's fair. Okay, my 4th least favorite thing. Let's go with, I have my 5 things here. I'm ranking them as we go here. 3-hour rounds.
Too much.
I don't like that every edition of 40K we're told that the game plays faster, and yet we still have 3-hour rounds. Drives me insane. I played, and I like that Anthony's here for this because I know he feels this vibe. I played about an hour and a half of 40K per round. That's how long the game took. Whether or not we made it to round 5 or whether or not we made it to round 3, it doesn't matter. About an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, maybe. That means a lot of sitting around, and yes, that's not all that matters, because lots of people still needed to take 3 hours. There were lots of people whose games weren't done at the end of 3 hours. There were people that played into lunch. There were people that played into the break after round 2 that made round 3 late. People took longer. Now, I understand that a lot of people are learning the rules. My first opponent was playing like his 3rd game of 10th edition. By the way, sorry to that opponent. That really didn't go well for him. I think that we need to, if we're going to speed up the game, we need to speed up the community. I'm not entirely sure how we do that. I know that there's a lot of arguments for clocks. I like clocks in that they speed up the game. I don't like clocks in that I think that they hamper the social contract of the game. I'm there to roll dice and be silly and have fun, and I just want to have a relaxing, fun game. And I think that clocks, at least for me, make the game a different vibe. They make it more intense, more serious. I think that's necessary in the undefeated bracket. I don't want that for the whole tournament. So that's how I feel about that. And Ian is saying that fast games because of Broken Eldar. No, I've played a lot of games of 10th edition, and in fact, I've only played about a quarter of my games with Eldar.
Yeah. So I have two thoughts on that. One, to the fast games because of Broken Eldar. I had similar conversations about this, and I actually think a lot of it is that the fight phase is much less used, and that's where...
What fight phase?
Exactly.
There's a fight phase?
Well, I'm going to find the army that lets me use it.
I'm aware that when the Custodes got to my guys and shot them from half an inch, I died. It seemed a lot like shooting, though, because they came up to me and then they rolled dice and I pulled all my models off. I thought that was just point-blank shooting. That was close combat. I didn't recognize it because of how little it exists.
Exactly. So that going away eats up or removes a lot of time because that's where a lot of the finicky, okay, I do this, and this.
Now, Noah's games were done quickly. Hank Stun's games were done quickly. Steve's games were done quickly. Like, I want to be clear that I am not just talking about Eldar.
Yeah.
It is just a faster game, especially at the top level where people really know what they're doing.
And that was the other point that I was going to make is I think that it is agnostic of rule set. Some players play slowly, some players don't. And I honestly think the way to fix it is to we go 2 hours and 45-minute rounds, and this is how long you get to play, guys. And also the people who take that long, they're not necessarily the ones winning the tournament, so they can be there and have fun. And I think we just have to accept that is what it is. So it's a messaging thing as much as anything.
Yeah, the other part of it is you might have 170 models and you might have 20.
Yeah.
And that is a thing that we have to balance for, right? I had 25 models. That's how many models were in my Eldar army. That's not very many, and I'm used to playing significantly more models than that, so obviously I'm going to play that quickly. Okay, that's number 4, 3-hour rounds. Number 3 is rock, paper, scissors.
Okay.
I found that, and I talked to some friends about that, I found that my games were decided at list design. My first game was against, I played so many games against Eldar that now I can't remember who my first opponent was. I played 3 straight mirrors of Eldar. And then my 4th game was into Eldar, and they stopped me an hour in and put me into Custodes. That's a different story. But yeah, my first opponent's list had no ability to deal with me. My second opponent's list had no ability to deal with me. My third opponent's list is when I started my run of Eldar mirrors, and I had Night Spinners and he didn't, so I won. Next one, I outflanked the Wraith Knight and he didn't, so I won. Next game, I had Night Spinners and he didn't, so I won. The mirror matches were decided by the fact that I had geared my list for the mirror. The other matches I played, their rule set wasn't good enough to hang. And then in the 6th round, I played against Custodes, and we could have had a really good game, but I was tired and I played it really badly. So I thought when I left the table that I lost at list design. That's not correct at all. I just was blitzed, tired, and deployed like a moron. That happens. Good learning experience for me. I hadn't really practiced into Custodes, so the fact that Steve beat me was fine. We had a good game. I've played Steve Trimble a lot, and we always have a really good game. But that was also the only fight phase I saw, basically, in the entire game. I think the Incarn tried to kill my Wraith Knight at one point. That's kind of close combat. But yeah, it was really weird how much I thought games were, and my friends were saying the same thing. Tyler Bortell's Gene Stealer Cult, he played 2 actual games of 40K out of 9 rounds.
Yeah.
The rest of the time he said that his rules were so wildly broken that it didn't even feel like 40K. It just felt like he was leaf blowing people off the table with Gene Stealer Cult. Hank felt the same way. While Hank felt like he had to use his brain in game by game, Hank felt that there was a lot of his games where his opponent just couldn't deal with his tech. So I think there's a lot of that. Yeah. I don't love it. I think that the balance that's really where the balance shows up. Yeah. More than the haves and the have-nots, I think that there's a lot of rock, paper, scissors at the high end. Knights were wrecking people, but every time they ran into Eldar with fire prisms and a Wraith Knight, the Knights lost.
Yeah. Yep.
Like there was just this these kind of just things that happened that was just the way that it was. And also, can we stop talking about how good Marines are? Can people stop putting them in the A or S tier? That would be great, because at some point they are going to have to be performant if we're going to call them really good. And maybe the stat check guys will be like, no, Colin's wrong. Here's the data. And I haven't seen the data, so I'll say, yes, guys, I'm wrong. But that my view is that Marines are really, 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 really struggling.
Well, in fairness to Marines, Danny did win an RTT with a Dark Angels army this weekend that he said wasn't very good. But yeah, I think Marines have the Desolation Marine unit, and then it's really hard to figure out what the heck else to do with the remaining 1,600 points of that army.
Anthony says, Marines are insane. Pilots are just busy with WTC. I think it is completely fair that the tier list of how good things are is different for veteran players than everybody else. I think that's completely fair. That there's some armies that are better played by better players. Fine. Okay, that was number 3, I think.
Yes.
Okay, number 2, the terrain. I'm also going to talk about liking the terrain here in a minute. The terrain is on both lists. Here's what I didn't like about the terrain. Every single table had an enormous L. The biggest L I have ever played with, and I played WTC Giant Ls in 8th edition. The biggest L I have ever had to deploy in my entire history of 40K, and I had it on every single table in every single game. In the left corner of the table means that I have it in Hammer, I have it in Diagonal, I have it in Dawn, I have it in every deployment zone. I literally, for the first 5 games, put my tanks behind the same L on every table. My Farseers, my tanks, there they are. My Warwalkers and my Warp Spiders and my Rangers go somewhere else on the table based on what I need. Let's start the game. In fact, doing that deployment against Steve is why I didn't have a game against Custodes, because what I was supposed to do is spread my army out across my deployment zone and have everybody go at maximum speed in different directions.
Right.
Steve had 3 units of 10 Wardens, and those guys can only go so many directions.
Right.
If I had spread out, I would have been able to get points, and I would have been able to poke at him until he didn't have enough guys left. Instead, I castled up in the deployment zone, and he boxed me in, which I was not supposed to do, and that's fine. I'm happy to make a mistake there. But the point is that I was bored. I had some boredom issues at the tournament that aren't 40K's fault. I didn't actually like the Eldar list I brought. It was extremely two-dimensional. It was fast guns with no close combat, because that's the army. And I just found it kind of boring. I found the Wraith Knight extremely boring. In fact, I don't think it's worth the points. If you guys want to hear more about that, I'm going to go through all my games in extreme detail at 9 o'clock Pacific on Sunday in Best in Faction. I have pictures of my games. I took pictures this time. I have pictures of the event. I'm going to do a slideshow like I went on a vacation to Tahiti, and I'm making all my friends sit through the, what were those called? The little... Remember you have the little things, and you put them in the big thing.
Slide projectors.
Yeah, and they were, and yeah. And you go click, and it go ching, and you go, here's my picture of me in Tahiti. Okay, that's the vibe of Best in Faction next weekend. As I'm going to talk about all this in an incredible great deal. But
I was bored by that we're the network of the olds.
Exactly right. I was extremely bored by Eldar. Except Phantasm, which is wildly broken, and I played a mini game with myself that was, what Phantasm can I do this turn that will be the most obnoxious to my opponent? In the games that were not close, that was what I did. I was like, maybe I'll Phantasm this way. That'll be amusing. But I found the guns extremely boring. And then the big problem for me is because of how static the terrain felt, I felt like I was deploying in the same way and playing the same game each time.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is I did play 3 Eldar mirrors in a row, but they were very different Eldar lists from each other, especially George, who I'm going to talk about. Jorge George.
Real quick there, just on the homogeneity of the terrain. They use the same table. No, did they have all different table layouts?
Yeah, so half the room was table 1 and half the room was table 2.
Okay.
And then on the second day, half the room was table 3 and half the room was table 4. And the tables were different. The terrain in the middle of the table was different, but the outlying terrain was the same. And as a result, it made me feel like I was playing the same game of 40K every time. I can't stand that. I'm a drug addict for the new. I have to have the new, and I really didn't care for that. That really bothered me.
Okay.
Number one, close combat doesn't exist. I really hate that. Hate it so much. I could rant about this for the next hour. I'm not going to. Unless you're a Custodes player, they've ruined close combat. Knights get to punch people, fine. Knights, as everybody knows, are an outlier to the rule set that I don't usually factor into my overall look at how the game is, because they're an outlier. They aren't playing by the same rules as everybody else. Genestealer Colt, who used to be a close combat army, has the Aberrant unit that does kill things at close combat, but is mostly in the list because it's very durable and it distracts your opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else's close combat really struggles. It's not high enough strength, or it doesn't get there well enough, or it's too fragile, or whatever. But then they make the Custodes army easily have access to fight first, which is a completely overpowered universal rule, because it means if you charge them and they say, hey, we're fighting first, they are actually fighting first, rather than just joining the charge phase and getting to go after your charging unit like they did in 9th edition. Because of that, anything that charged the Custodes player, and you could ask Steve or Hank about this, anything who charged the Custodes players just died. Didn't matter. Abaddon and 10 Chaos Terminators charged into the 10 Warden Brick for Hank, and the Warden Brick went first, and everybody but Abaddon died.
I believe that.
So the Custodes hit really hard. They have always strike first. That means that they're the only army that gets to play close combat. Congrats, Custodes. You're the only close combat army. Huzzah! So I think that Anthony just said part of the reason there's no other melee armies is Custodes, which is a super weird move. Anthony, you could just do my job next time. We're saying all the same things. He said if they couldn't do it for free, it would be fine. I completely agree. I mean, Anthony, they have to be on an objective, which, when you have a 10-man unit of, what are they, 40-millimeter bases that's trying to hold the table, is so challenging to have one of them barely towing into an objective. Okay. So I was really bothered by how close combat has been treated in 10th edition. We've talked about that before. It's probably the core issue with the design. I was talking to Salty John and a few other of the judges, and they were saying that their opinion is that the 10th edition core rules are quite strong and quite good. Mm-hmm. And it's really the indexes that are the problem. I think they're mostly right. I like that. I like that take. One of the things I'd say about the core rules is that if they're not going to buff in codexes the close combat stats, they need to make some changes to things like Overwatch. I think that Overwatch is way too easy. In fact, the whole point of my list was a guided Wraith Knight overwatching you each turn is really gross. And they did rule at the tournament that you can do the double Overwatch in one phase thing if you have the I get to use a strat that someone else has already used tech. Yeah. That means you get to Overwatch. I don't think you should. I think that you can only Overwatch once per turn should overrule that, but it does not. And GW ruled it that way. But that's even worse for close combat armies. I think that the core rule set is kind of skewed against close combat. I also think that the movement shenanigans of I'm charging, but everybody has to base, which means that if I roll a high charge, parts of my unit have to way overshoot where I want them to be. I think that that's all really hard for players to understand, and it makes close combat kind of a cluster hug. So that's by far my least favorite thing about the tournament. Part of that is I didn't bring close combat, but none of my opponents tried to close combat me really either. And I talked to everybody else, and they weren't really seeing close combat either. And Chuck was playing orcs, and he was doing close combat. But if you want to talk about somebody who thinks the game was decided at list design, come to Best in Faction on Sunday and listen to Chuck's experience playing orcs. There were the games where the orcs won, and there were the games where the orcs lost. And Chuck did not feel like his skill mattered in that formula.
Yeah. Look, let me just jump in because I do agree with way less actual reps on this with the take that it's mostly a datasheet problem. Just if you look at where the datasheets line up in terms of what the melee profiles are, Custodes are the only ones that really have good melee profiles, other than potentially demons, and I'm going to test it out and see if I can make that work. Mostly because I'm a snowflake. Otherwise, I'm gonna buy a Custodes army. But I do think that it can be changed with data sheets. One thing, and I know you and I have gone back and forth on this, but one thing that would be useful to fix the specific thing that you're talking about with Custodes with Always Fight First is access to reliable the target of your charge is battle shocked. Because if they are, they don't have fights first, because that's a stratagem. So giving that
or the character in their unit just gives it to them, Billy.
Well, yes, but not in most of the lists that you are actually seeing.
I think Hank's list has that, doesn't it?
He has it in smaller 3-man units, but that's actually a deal-withable thing. That's not going to just detonate Abaddon and 10 Terminators. It's going to kill 5 of the Terminators.
Yeah, I agree with you that Battle Shock is kind of like Fight Last. One of the things I should have put on the list is that Battle Shock is ridiculously stupid. Basically, in 6 games, Battle Shock never mattered. Oh, Anthony says he has to use a strat. My mistake. Nothing, just hardline. Okay, great. He has to use a strat, so Battle Shock would help you. The problem is that Battle Shock is so wildly unreliable.
Yes.
And also, I never saw Battle Shock matter in any of my games. So we've put this entire phase into the game, and there's a whole bunch of the things that make Battle Shock happen. But it'd regularly be, okay, you have to take a Battle Shock now after this happened. And it'd be like, okay, I failed it, but that doesn't do anything because I wasn't going to use a strat. It is what it is. Again, when I'm playing Eldar, if you want to Battle Shock me in your shooting phase, I've already Phantasmed, so I'm good.
Right. Like I said, I think it actually only matters in close combat scenarios, because that's where you're most likely to be using stratagems that are going to matter in a timing that matters. But because close combat as an interactive part of the game doesn't happen right now due to what we've spent the last 30 minutes talking about, Battle Shock doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Again, the fact that I'm exploring demons, they're the one army that sort of has a way to make it happen regularly with minuses, with consequences. So I'm going to see.
Okay, I need to, in the spirit of getting time to talk about the actual list and tournament, I need to blow through my list of what's good. So, first of all, the game played really quick and easy. I felt like I didn't argue about rules hardly at all. I had a few rules questions, but Curry was always for some reason nearby and knew it off the top of his head. So I think that it was, my opponents and I didn't have confusion on things. We didn't struggle to understand. Everybody being in cover is kind of dumb, but
it is what it is.
But the example of that, but like the application of that wasn't confusing. People didn't struggle to understand why that was the case. The missions were pretty easily understood. I didn't play Servo Skulls. I think that was the mirror match game or the ghost round. So yeah, I thought the games played really quick, but I don't mean like they were done too fast in 3-hour rounds. I mean that like at the table, I felt engaged and not distracted. I didn't find myself playing with dice in front of me, waiting for my opponent's turn to be done. And then at the end of every movement phase, they had to pause because I'm playing Eldar and they know I'm going to Phantasm every turn. So there was a certain amount of interaction there that I really appreciated. So that would be my number 5. My number 4 is what Salty John and the judges were talking about. The core rules are so well written that judging calls are easy, that understanding things is easy, that the game itself is in a really good structure that I thought was quite fun. I liked how things interacted with each other, with the exception of close combat being completely broken. I thought psychic powers like Smite being guns was fine. I thought that was going to annoy me. I appreciated not having to sit through a psychic phase every turn. So yeah, I thought that the core rules really showed themselves well. People looking at their data cards sped up the game, and I could say something like, what's the OC on blah, blah, blah? And my opponent would pick up cards and flip through and say 2, and I'd say, okay. I thought that was all great. Number 3, the terrain. I said I didn't like the way that the terrain always had an L. That's true, but I did like the plexiglass, and I did like the density. It was extremely hard for fire prisms to get angles on everything on the table. I had to move their 14 inches. I had to carefully move them so they could see each other. I had to put a lot of effort into getting fire prisms into position to shoot good targets. That's what we want because fire prisms are potentially the most broken tank in the game. So we want them to have to work at that. But remember that if we're going all in on gun lines, we need to have dense terrain so that everything in someone's army can't shoot at everything in your army all the time. We need to be able to position things like infantry to move around the table. I also didn't have to deal with difficult or frustrating indirect fire, which I thought was going to be a thing. And without that, the terrain really makes it easy to do some really fun positioning and movement stuff. So, yeah, I liked the see-through plexiglass because it lets you see the table. Because the battle mat is interesting. So you got the battle mat with the terrain on top of it. I don't know. I think that that opaque would be fine too. Okay, that's the terrain. Number 2 is the people. 10th edition is a very toxic edition. People are upset about it. People are complaining about it. I went to an RTT where everyone complained about it through the whole RTT. Our Discord struggles to not turn into complaining about it. Facebook's complaining about it. Other people's Discords are complaining about it. My opponents didn't. Nope. People complained about Eldar. That's fine. I was complaining about Eldar. I made jokes about how dumb my army was the whole tournament. But people didn't complain about the actual rules. People didn't complain about what GW had done. People didn't complain about the idea that these indexes were not play tested. And by the way, I love to support and stand up for GW. I cannot argue that. So yeah, everybody was really, really, really positive and having a great time. And I think that is so wonderful. That this game that everyone's frustrated with, supposedly, that I cannot spend a day on the internet without someone griping to me about, that this game, when we got to the tournament, everybody was okay. And there wasn't nonstop complaining, at least in my games and my friends' games that we talked about. Finally, number 1, 40K is still fun. I don't like towering. I don't like close combat being gone. I found my army boring. The terrain bothered me. With all of that, I had a good time.
There you go.
My opponents were great. The terrain was fun. The game itself was fine. I had just a wonderful time, and everybody else I know that did as well. So if you're out there thinking, well, I'm just going to take a break from 40K till 10th edition is fixed, I would say don't.
No.
I would say grab an army and go. Worst case scenario, you might have to play a really broken army in one game. Who cares? Were you going to win every game anyways? Probably not. So lose a game to the Eldar player and try to make friends with him. It's not his fault that his army is really good.
Let me actually jump on that point really quick, because one thing that GW events do that no other events do, other than Nova, as far as I'm aware, is that they break up into pods after 3 rounds, and then you're only play against like the 16 people who are plus or minus your how you did. And to your point of you might have to play one broken army, but then not. Paul Winters, who only plays Slanesh, he went 2-2 in his seeding games, and then he won his pod. Yeah. So inside of the tiers, however the tiers are accurately described, there is balance and there is the opportunity for player skill to come out. It's just figuring out a system to ensure that you get those games in. There is still fun to be had. There are apples to apples, oranges to oranges, tigers to tigers. The difficulty is just when the tiger goes up to the apple. To bust the analogy.
Okay, I'm confused, but let's move on. All right, let's talk about how people actually did at the Tacoma Open. I got 20th while not playing my last 2 games, as previously discussed. So the winner of the event was Steve Trimble. Steve is one of the best players in the area. Steve is a very aggressive player. He deploys on the line and comes at you. People make fun of Steve for that. It is a completely viable way to play the game, Anthony. So he runs right at you. He brought a list that does that in spades. It is literally 30 Custodian Guard and some other stuff. He really likes the Caladius Assassin. Excuse me, the Calidus Assassin. The Caladius Assassin would be a whole different thing. He likes the Calidus Assassin. In my game, he used it to pop it up and then come down and do an action, which I thought was a really clever idea for something that's a lone operator that can re-deep strike itself. So I thought that was really cool. But basically, his list was extremely durable and shot you like crazy on its way to coming over to punch you in the face.
Yep.
Not a lot of nuance, but a really good stat check. That little shout out to our friends. A really good stat check at the table. Can you deal with these custodians? Probably not. And by the way, they're ridiculous in close combat, and their shooting's really good. So here they come. He did take Trajan. He said that he doesn't like Trajan with the ruling they made it at the tournament. I forgot to ask how that ruling works, but there's an issue with how Trajan was ruled for how his universal how his rules work.
Yeah, it's which modifiers he does or doesn't get to ignore. And
Okay.
there were some he didn't. There were some that Steve would have liked him to get to ignore that he didn't, and it obviously greatly impacted his ability to win the games.
Fair enough. Second place was from Best in Tabletop, Hank Adams. For those who have watched this show for a while, we used to have Hank's List Corner. That's Hank. Hank is all in on custodes. I helped him with the list some, but I'm far from a custodes expert, so I'm not even taking the assist on this one. Hank made a list that he thought felt really good about it. He actually teched for Gene Stealer Colt. We were all preparing for Tyler Bortel because I feel that Gene Stealer Colt's the best army in the game. So we were all preparing for it. Hank prepared for it by taking a 10-man of the what are they called? Inquisitorial Henchmen with an Inquisitor. That's a unit with a 12-inch no deep strike aura that he can wrap up in the middle of his 10-man custodian guard unit, and then put that in somewhere relatively protected. And now Gene Stealer Colt can't really come in and hammer that unit with the bombs or get really close with the neophytes. So that's neat. He's got Blade Champion, Shield Captain, and Alaris Terminator armor, and then he's got a unit, only one unit of 10 Custodian Guard. He has a unit of 5 Alaris Custodians, which he found extremely useful. They shoot like crazy. They're durable. Pretty neat. He has 2 Caladiuses. Hank loves the Caladiuses because they have a reasonable shot of killing the Wraith Knight on the first turn if you go first. They don't do it every time, but they certainly are going to work it down to a point where it's not as scary. They're really good in the Knights matchup. They're pretty hideable on GW Train, so you kind of get to hide them, and even against towering, because they said that all windows are blocked all the way up. Mm-hmm. Most of it was one story, but a lot of it had roofs over it, and I found that I could put a Night Spinner in there under the terrain, and that across the table the Knights couldn't see me.
That's something I've been saying for 2 weeks because I did that in my tournament and it worked.
Yeah, but you can't do that with very many tanks. But 2 Caladiuses when you're putting the rest of your army probably near the line, I thought that was fine. So that's Hank's list. He got second place. He played Steve in the mirror to win the tournament. For Steve to win the tournament. Jeremy Bergdale from Portland, a good friend of mine. Well, a good opponent in the past. We don't actually know each other that well. But Jeremiah took Eldar. He has a pretty standard Eldar list with the Autarch and the Farseer and Illic. He also took the Solitaire, which I think is fun. He did take a Wave Serpent, which surprised me. He took 2 Hornets, 2 units of Shadow Specters. Shadow Specters were really big at the tournament because of their ability to deal with Gene Stealer Colt. Mm-hmm. 2 units of Warp Spiders. He had the 10-man Wraithguard unit. For those that haven't seen that unit yet, what's really cool about it is that the guns are treated as pistols. So when they get hit and they get to immediately attack back, whether they took damage or not, which is gross, their guns are pistols for that. So the people that were running Wraithguard, what they do is they move up. On your turn, they'd phantasm towards you. Then on their turn, they'd shoot you, and then they'd charge something like the Wraith Knight that they can't possibly kill. The Wraith Knight would punch them, not do anything, and the Wraithguard would then shoot the Wraith Knight. So you'd get double shooting in that turn into the Wraith Knight. Super good, super neat. I don't know that I like that unit for 400 points, basically 310 for the Wraithguard plus the Spirit Seer. Mm-hmm. 390 points. It's cheaper than the Wraith Lord. Excuse me, the Wraith Knight. So that was Jeremiah's list. Fourth place was Matthew Geyer with Chaos Demons from Team Zero Comp. Matthew is a pretty well-known good player. Here's his list. Are you ready?
I've seen it, yeah.
Bellicor, Shalaxi, Bloodthirster, Lord of Change, 12 Flamers. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's the list. I'll say so. Fifth place was Necrons. It's a very aggressive. I'm going to do a bunch of damage to you, Necron list. It's not just I brought a bunch of things you can't kill. He's got Doomsday Arcs and Heavy Destroy. Oh, that's who I played in the first round was Necrons. That's who I played. I remember now. And the Doomsday Arcs were like, what if we didn't kill the Wraith Knight? And I was like, well, then the Wraith Knight's going to kill you.
Yes.
He did have 2 units of Lich Guard, which is pretty obnoxious, but he didn't run the 20-man ridiculous to kill Necron Warrior unit, which I don't actually think is in the best Necron lists. That's something for us to watch out for. 6th place was Imperial Knights. Imperial Knights were extremely popular, doing very well at the tournament. Number 7 from Team USA is Ben Jurek. I had a good amount of time to talk to Ben. His list is very similar to what I took, where he's got the same characters everybody else does, but he has the Incarn, and he takes the Night Spinners and the Fire Prisms like I do. He has Shadow Specters, which I don't get to take. And other than that, Wraith Knight, Warp Spiders. I don't have Shadow Specters, but Wraith Knight, Warp Spiders, Warwalkers, the same stuff that I was taking. And Ben managed to rock out 7th. 8th is Tyler Bortel with his Genestealer Cult. It's the same list every time, but it's a million neophytes and then 2 units of bomb guys. Kind of is what it is. Number 9 is, by the way, he lost to Noah's Knights in what they both said is the best game of 40K they played in a year. So I know that Tyler will be talking about that on TNG on Saturday. So if you want to hear more about that, you can do that. Then that was Tyler's only loss, putting him in 8th place rather than having him in the finals. Noah had a tie and a loss over the course of the tournament with his Knights. He played really, really great. And then finally in 10th place is another Eldari. But I'm just going to keep going so you guys can hear what I'm talking about. Genestealer Cult, Eldari, Thousand Suns, Iron Hands. So 14th is where we see our first Marine. 5th Fiend is Imperial Knights, then Drukhari, then Imperial Knights, then Necrons, then Eldari, then Custodes, then Eldari, then Custodes, then Space Wolves. You guys getting the idea? Then Marines, then Eldari. Okay. So Eldar, all throughout the list, entirely too good. Probably why I played 3 Eldar Mirrors.
Yep.
But that's the way the tournament, like those factions are the ones that everyone knew is good. There's no Admech or Votan or whatever orcs or Sisters of Battle. Like there's none of the Imperial Guard. None of that stuff is in that top like 20 that I just read you. So the game is not balanced. That said, there's more than one army that can win. And I think that's really significant. Like you don't have to play Eldar if you want to win. There's like 7 or 8 options that are competitive, but there's another 20 options that got no game.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is the Tacoma Open. I'm going to talk now for a few minutes about the show. How much do you need to talk about, Billy? Because I realize now we're going really long.
I can go very quickly. Make sure that I have 7 minutes.
We have 9 minutes right now, Billy.
Yeah, so the Show Me Showdown is more of a read the factions of the first 3 players.
Okay, I can do that. Except that I closed my window, and now I'm on the 109th page of our prep document. Hold on. I accidentally closed my window when I was trying to close Tacoma out.
If you had to guess what the first 3 factions of the Show Me
Showdown. I know what they are.
Yeah.
I know what they are. I can go a few minutes over. That's not a big deal today. Okay, so placings at the Show Me Showdown. The Show Me Showdown was a 100-player event in Lee's Summit, Missouri, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And the top winners were Eldari. Sorry, they're also all from the same team, and I think that their lists are the same. So I don't know how they managed to not play each other, or maybe they did, and it just didn't matter. They still were going to get the top. I didn't get a chance to look at if they played each other.
Yeah.
One of them has Wraith Guard, the other one does, another one doesn't. It's the things that we know are good from Eldar over those top 3. I'd rather talk about 4th place, which is a Tyrannid list. Tyranids so far have not been perceived as a have. They've been perceived as a have not. He played Monster Mash with a Trigon and 2 Maleceptors and 2 Exocrines, and the Biovores are great. Everybody's taking those. Zoanthropes are great. Everybody's taking those. I suspect they didn't use GW Train at this event. What we've seen is that while Monster Mash is very strong, it's not particularly strong on GW Train. The aisles are too hard. You end up basically getting shoved into corridors that can be move blocked, and it's really rough. That's just my take. Playing against, I have a friend Josh who really likes Monster Mash, so I've played it on the train. I don't see how it's really that good on that train. But I wish it was because Nidzil has always been something that's been near and dear to me. Genestealer Cold is in 5th place. Oh, I should say Trainer Wolf is first place. Dan Salmons is second. Austin Howell is third. Mitch McGill with Tyranids is fourth. Peyton Priest in fifth with Gene Stealer Cult. Aaron Hermstead with Chaos Knights in sixth. That Chaos Knights is really interesting because my understanding is they have no game into Imperial Knights from all the Knight players I talked to. And so that puts them in a really weird place in the meta. Eldari in seventh with Ben Sherwin, a longtime Eldari player. Brent Simon Eldari. John Indelicate, who it's not actually Indelicate, but that's what we call him on the show. A big fan of our show, listens a lot. He was in 9th place with Tyranids, and Kyle McCord in 10th place with Astra Militarum. So that event had some different stuff in the top 10, and I dig that about it. But as we go farther on, we will absolutely see what holds up over time. So we've got 6 minutes left for Billy to tell us about the other tournaments, not the 7 he asked for.
That's fine. There are 2 tournaments, and there are fewer lists in the 8 list that I'm going to talk about than you would think. Denver 40K Fight Club July Open, because we should just add more words into our event names, in Denver, Colorado. 65 players, 5 rounds. Won by Ben Neal with Imperial Knights.
Nice.
I think Ben is enjoying the fact that Forge World got released because he's got 2 Cerastus Lancers. Those run real fast, punch you real hard. A Crusader, 3 Warglaves, and the Calidus Assassin. One thing the Calidus has also is it has Vect, and Vect is good. Second place, Michael Mann with Orcs. Bunch of dudes in 5 trucks. 30 Beast Nagaboys, 10 Knobs, and 10 Flash Kits across 5 trucks. A smattering of different characters, and 30 Gretchen 5-Store Boys. Third place, you got Joel Davis with Eldari. He did the Wraith Guard and Wraith Knight, along with all of the various shootings. Shadow Specters. One thing that the community can help Colin with, figure out the Age of Sigmar model that is the base of a Shadow Spectre that he can kit bash together. That would be something that would make Colin's life better.
I don't know. I'm kind of all in on the Tyranid Codex right now. I'm kind of waiting for the Tyranid Codex because I don't actually like the Eldar rules. I know they're really powerful and Phantasm's really entertaining, but the rest of the rules are just, I'm going to shoot you really, really well while being fast. I'm hoping that the Tyranid Codex is more interesting. Anyways, go ahead, Billy.
That's fair. As someone else who is a, truly lifelong Eldar player, I'm not playing with Eldar because the way they play is not my fun. Colin K, 4th place, Chaos Space Marines. Abaddon.
Wait, did you just say that I came in 4th place with Chaos Space Marines?
No, different Colin. Someone coming at you for best in Colin.
I was just really surprised that I didn't remember doing that.
No, it's a Colin K, another Colin. Abaddon. This Colin brought Cypher, and anyone who ever brings Cypher just gets a brownie point. Harkin brought 3 different Predators, 1 Annihilator, 2 Destructors, Vindicator, 3 Forge Fiends, 5 Raptors, 3 Nurglings, and the Changeling. So again, for most of these armies, you're looking at find the most efficient shooting that is durable where possible and put it on the table. And that does seem to be the place that GW got the math wrong on their indexes, is that they overdid durability, and there are a few things that can shoot into that durability, and everything else is going to kind of struggle. Other than, this is something that can shoot into that durability. When we get to the London Open in July in London, England, and we're talking about this one both because of the quality of players who finished in it, because it's only 43 players in 5 rounds, the quality of player and the decisions that they made. Because just like the Show Me Showdown had 3 armies, 3 of the same army in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, so did the London Open in July. And I want to feel smart for what we said last week when we said GSC was the best army in the game. And this is going to help me with that argument. The London Open in July was 1st place GSC, 2nd place GSC, 3rd place GSC, 4th place Eldari.
Does anyone think it's weird that one tournament is all Custodes, one tournament is all Eldari, and one tournament is all Jinxdale Occult? What the heck is happening here?
It needs to be a little bit of, put them all in the stew and see what rises to the top. I actually think you probably would get to a player skill point when those 3 armies went against each other, because there are enough rock, paper, scissors-y that I think it could work. But For the London Open in July, they're members of a team called Ignite. Johansson in first place and Boris Mitchev in second played a point-for-point same army. Klamovis,
That's Boris from Bad Moon. What is it? Well, anyways, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was trying to shout him out, but I don't remember what. Bad Moon Cafe? Is that what it's called? Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. So Klamovis, 2 Nexus, 2 Primus, 2 Reductress, 55 demo charge acolytes.
That's a weird number of them. Without their strats and buffs, they're real weird.
Okay. 40 neophytes and a Ridge Runner.
All right.
So first and second place, both 5-0 undefeated. Nassim Fouchain, third place with GSC. He had the 10 aberrants in the place of 20 demo charge acolytes, but it was 25 demo charge acolytes, 20 neos, 3 Ridge Runners, along with the various characters. And then Clement Tornade, the Inari player from across the water, who we enjoyed his list of last year. He has the Eldar army, he has the Incarnate, some Shadow Specters, D-Cannons, Wraith Knight, Warp Spiders, etc., etc., etc. So the Eldar, it's find the most efficient shooting, shove it in the list. Also, the second tier most efficient shooting is going to live when the first tier gets nerfed into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the events. My early take on the meta is that there are just some math mistakes that GW made, and we are living in the math mistake world. And the sooner that can get addressed, the better.
Yeah, I think that's fair. For sure. I think that the indexes were not particularly play tested, and that's what we're doing now. I don't think that's reasonable, but the show is not about that. The show is about being excited about 40K. So I think that for a lot of the armies, it's not so bad. And there's just outliers on either side. And if you don't consider those outliers, it's not nearly as bad. So, things will get addressed. I personally think that we're not going to have to wait multiple months for a balance slate change. I think that they're going to have an emergency fix that will be sooner than that. They haven't said that, but I think that over the next few weeks, the guys who do data like StatCheck and other people and look at the tournaments, I think they're going to see that GSC, Custodes, Eldar, Imperial Knights are all going to be at crazy win rates when you remove, especially if you remove from analysis those guys playing each other, and you look at them playing the field that's not those 4. I think it's going to be really, really, really super ugly. And I think that GW is going to have no choice but to address that. Gene Stealer Cult needs to be addressed immediately. There are core rules in Gene Stealer Cult that aren't okay. Like when they come in from a blip, it doesn't say that they all have to be near the blip. So you can put one guy on the blip, and then you can string your next 19 neophytes across the table wherever you want them to be, effectively taking any objective that you would like. So, I mean, they have to be 9 inches away from your opponent still, but that's insane. So there's stuff like that where it's like, okay, is this what you meant it to do? Did you write this rule correctly? Gene Stealer Cult has a bunch of that sort of stuff that is being exploited. So I actually think that an errata would actually fix a great deal of the problems of Gene Stealer Cult. The reason I think they're the best army is because of helping people prep Custodes for them and helping people prep Eldar for them and watching their game into Knights. I think that Knights have a relative decent matchup into them because Knights can just decide to shoot them like crazy. One of the key reasons that Noah beat Tyler is that Noah got a 12 mortal Overwatch from his I rolled a 6 and then a 6 and wiped an entire Neo unit in that Overwatch. And that was a really big deal.
Yeah.
But Knights and GSC have a bit of a match into each other. But to me, if I was going to play an army that I thought, if I was a John Lennon or or Anthony or one of the Art of War level dudes, and I was going to go to a tournament and I wanted to bring the best faction to win and didn't care about what I actually wanted to play, I'd bring Gene Stealer Cult. That's where I'm at in the game right now.
I agree.
I took Gene Stealer Cult to an RTT, and I think that they're not fun to play, so I don't play them. But they are wildly overpowered. Yeah. So with that, that's our analysis of 10th edition for the week. Each week's going to get pretty exciting as we get more and more data and see how this is all going to shake out. One of the things that we saw at our tournament is a lot of people teched for Eldar, and a lot of people kind of knew how to do it. And so some of the Eldar players were dropping off earlier than they expected because the community is starting to respond. And I think that that's a big part of of how the meta changes. It's not just nerfs; it's also people having the time and the focus to really adapt their list to those armies. Talking about how custodes play into Eldar was a really fun project that I did with Hank last week, and then talking about how they play into Gene Stealer Cult. So lots of fun. Everything's still great. Don't worry, everybody. The game's still fun. People are still great. All you have to do is manage your expectations right now. Don't go to a tournament with Gene Steel with Sisters of Battle and say, I'm going to win every game. Maybe you will, and maybe we'll talk about you on the show and say, this is the Lord of all Sisters of Battle. But it's probably not going to happen, so just try to have fun. All right. That's us for this week. Oh, do you have any last thoughts, Billy?
Nope, I was just going to say that's my message too.
Okay, that's it for us at This Week in 40K. He's Billy, and I'm Colin, because someone has to be, and we'll be back next week to tell you guys more. We love y'all. Hope you have fun. Bye now.
Well, Colin left instead of ending broadcast. Bye-bye, everyone.